1941 was a good year for beach racing in Daytona. Bill France was busy planning the 42 season when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and brought the United States into World War II. Needs for the national defense put a stop to racing as America focused on the war effort. The 4 years of war left Bill France starting from scratch in the race promotion business. France had promoted several races in late 1945 and got racing on the beach going again in April 1946. The 46 beach race was won by a disabled veteran named Red Byron in a '39 Ford. Byron had been shot down over the Pacific in a B-24 bomber and then spent 27 months in the hospital recovering from injuries caused by the crash, which included a shattered left leg. Byron's victory on the beach would be the first of 4 victories on the beach road course. 1946 would also be the last year Bill France would drive in competition. His promotional skills now honed, tracks all over the region wanted France to publicize their races. France formed the National Championship Stock Car Circuit and began promoting races full-time. As director of the NCSCC, France put together a full slate of races in 1947 and crowned 7 race winner Fonty Flock as champion at the end of the season. 1947 was a successful year for stock car racing, and Bill France felt it was time to better unify the tracks and promoters. So France organized a December 14th meeting at Daytona's Streamline Hotel with 35 of stock car racing's most influential men. The purpose of the meeting? To lay down rules and set up a governing body for the sport. The group came out of the meetings 3 days later with a set of rules and a new name. Several new names for the organization had been considered, but Mechanic Red Vote is credited with the one that stuck. The National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing, NASCAR, would be the new name for the sanctioning body. Bill France was elected president and stated its objectives. The purpose of this association is to unite all stock car racing under one set of rules, to set up a benevolent fund and a national point standing system whereby only one stock car driver will be crowned national champion.
Well, you know, the problem we had then, of course, was it was tough. The drivers were tough. The racetrack operators were really a bunch of guys that would do almost anything to each other to get to walk on their turf. And what this whole ungangly mess of things that was going on, what Bill France did was come in and become an anchor and straighten all of it out as much as you could. And he guaranteed that when the drivers would go to a track that they were going to get paid because he got the purse up front. He guaranteed the promoters were going to have a good show. And also the other thing is he really was a great pioneer in insurance, and that was what was lacking with a lot of racing back in those days. Is the driver, some tracks ran with no insurance on the driver or spectator.
NASCAR sanctioned 3 classes of competition in 1948: roadsters, modified stocks, and the headliner Strictly Stocks, which would feature late model sedans. The Strictly Stocks class would evolve into what is known today as the Winston Cup Series, but in 1948 there was a shortage of new cars. None had been produced during the war and Detroit was still catching up, so the bread and butter of NASCAR racing that year would be modified racing with mostly 1930s machinery. NASCAR ran 52 races in '48, with Red Byron being crowned its first champion. As a new sanctioning body, NASCAR had a good year, but still needed to separate itself from the crowd of other racing organizations. With as many as 6 different sanctioning groups with point systems crowning national champs, there was a lot of confusion about who really was the stock car champion. NASCAR needed to find a way to be unique. Bill France still felt that his Strictly Stock class was the answer. France reasoned that the general public would be more interested in a race that featured cars they could buy off the showroom floor. With no other sanctioning body using the division, NASCAR would then have a true national champion. That set the stage for the new class. On June 19, 1949, the first Strictly Stock race was held on a 3/4-mile dirt track in Charlotte. Anyone with a full-size American passenger car was eligible to enter, and the 33-car field filled up quickly. Bob Flock grabbed the pole with a lap of 67.958 miles per hour. Bob's brother Tim qualified next to him in the second spot, which is pretty amazing considering Tim had come to the race without a ride.
It's hard to believe, but I didn't have a car 1 week before that race, and Bob and Funny had cars, and we happened to see a brand new 88 sitting up next to the fence, a lady and a guy sitting and watching some of the cars go around the track, and Bob says, why don't you go over there and ask them people, would they let you run that car in next Sunday's race? This is a week before the race. And I said, Bob, have you lost your mind and people think I'm crazy? He said, come on, I'll go over there with you. So I walked over the car, and Buddy and Betty 8 was in the car from Hickory, North Carolina, and they own the hosier mill over there. So I asked Buddy, I introduced myself, and Bob, I said, how about let me drive that 88 in next Sunday's race? And the lady, Betty 8, looked on and she said, are you crazy? I said, Bob, I told you what she was going to say. But Buddy said, Tim, I'll be back tomorrow. I'm going to take Betty home tonight, and I'll come back tomorrow and let you know about that. And it's a brand new car. I think it had about 800 miles on it. Sure enough, he showed up the next day, and we started reinforcing the wheels, which NASCAR would let you do. And I finished 5th in that very first race.
The race featured 9 different makes of cars and would go 150 laps on the Carolina dirt. Bob Flock would give up the lead early in the race to Bill Blair in a Lincoln on lap 6. The race's only accident happened on lap 107 when racing newcomer Lee Petty rolled his Buick through turn 3. Petty was not hurt, but was left with a pretty badly damaged car to drive home. Glenn Dunaway assumed the point on lap 151 after Bill Blair dropped out with overheating troubles. Dunaway roared to the checkers 3 laps ahead of second place and apparently won the race. But a post-race inspection found the rear springs on his Ford had been spread for better stability, a violation of the rules.
Yeah, Glenn Dunaway won that first race, and after they inspected his car, it was probably an ex-bootlegger car because he had helper springs on the back of it, and they wasn't supposed to be on there, so they disqualified, and I think they give the race to Jim Roper in a big Lincoln.
Well, we come with 2 Lincolns, and we'll come with a backup car. We drove the cars then back then to wherever we were, and we drove through nonstop. We come to Charlotte. We were lucky. We win. We had a lot of controversy, and they tore the car down, and we didn't have any transportation home, and the engine was in pieces. And Lincoln dealer gave us a new engine, and we went from there.
A crowd of 13,000 watched that first race, and many who were there left with varying impressions.
There was a real curiosity factor here because, you know, you had cars that, I mean, nothing like it is today. They were just right off the street. I mean, a lot of people drove them to the track. They didn't even take the headlights out of most of them. They just put an X out of masking tape on it and took the hubcaps off and went racing. It was sort of boring to me because I'd been used to the NASCAR modifieds, and it was a lot of action in the modifieds, and this was such a weird race, taking cars right off the highway, that I spent most of my time selling Coca-Colas.
Bill France organized 7 more strictly stock races in 1949, and within 8 months, the newly named Grand National Division had replaced the modifieds as NASCAR's premier class. Red Byron won the strictly stock championship in 1949 with 2 wins in his 6 starts. The 1950 season began in February at Daytona. The beach road course had hosted races since 1935, and the drivers had developed unique ways to get around the beach and road course.
It was a 2-lane road, part of it, and then you turn and come onto the beach, and that was the racetrack. And they didn't have any fire equipment or anything like that. You'd see a car burst into flames while somebody just hit the dust, you know. And brakes, you'd run it, by the time you'd run 2 laps, there was old bonded lining back then, and heck, you were out of brakes on the 2nd lap, and you'd have to cross it. You'd have to drop 1 wheel off the pavement and cross the car up on the pavement to slow it down enough to go through the turn. And on the beach, we'd set up a slide like this, you know, and that would slow the car down, and you couldn't see anything on the beach either. The people were lined up on the side of the beach, and you just run till you run out of people and then turn left.
We actually run right beside the ocean. When the tide went out, that's where we run. And you said, what was it like? I remember the spray off of the cars would get on your windshield, and you could actually feel the car over here, and you move over and feel it, and you couldn't see him because the windows just covered it with that spray, you know, and move over a little bit, and then try to hold it straight. But it was real dangerous running down that beach with about 70, 80 cars, and the backstretch was real narrow. A1A highway, there was asphalt, and it was real narrow. I mean, it was passing those cars that was blowing up, just barely enough for 2 cars on that backstretch, and passed a car running 140 miles an hour, and him blowed up. It was tough, really.
Whenever you win Daytona down there first of the year, you're known all over the United States. In other words, people call you from California, everywhere else after you win down there. You mention, you call out there for something, tell them who you are. Oh yeah, you won the race at Daytona.
Experience was important to success, but in 1950, a rookie won in his first ever Grand National start at Daytona. Former Army tank driver Harold Kite bested the 41-car field in a Lincoln and took home $1,500. Kite's victory was an indication of how wild the 1950 season would become. In one of the most competitive points battles in NASCAR history, 7 different drivers held the points lead during the 19-race season. Bill Rexford eventually outlasted Curtis Turner and Fireball Roberts and won the Grand National Championship. 1950 had been a wild year, but the big news of the season took place at a new track in Darlington, South Carolina. Peanut farmer Harold Brasington had been to the 1948 Indianapolis 500 and was thrilled by the spectacle. He wanted to bring the same kind of excitement to the South, but there was no track capable of hosting a 500-mile event. So Brasington built Darlington Raceway, a banked 1.25-mile paved oval in the PD River region of South Carolina. Bill France was concerned that the Strictly stocks would break down trying to complete a 500-miler, and that would be bad for NASCAR's image. But France didn't want to lose the race to a competing sanctioning body and went on to assist in promoting the first Southern 500 with Brasington on Labor Day of 1950. The purse was $25,000, the largest to date in NASCAR history. The money attracted a field of 75 cars and over 25,000 spectators. The Grand National regulars had not raced on a paved surface before and quickly found out what the key to victory would be.
Well, everybody had different ideas of what it would take to run a race there in Darlington on a pavement, because we'd never run there like that before, you know. And back then, a lot of us had recap tires. And we'd take a drill and drill air holes in them to try to make them last, and they'd go about 10 laps, and it sounded like the 4th of July down there on the first race they had. They had a truckload of tires.
What got us all, they started 75 cars, started them 3 abreast. And from the start-finish line, the cars was lined up all the way through the 4th turn and part of the 3rd turn and part of the backstretch. But it would look like a bunch of New York taxi cabs when they dropped that flag. 75 cars trying to go on that first turn, and it was really a unique track. And that was our first big track really to run on, a big purse. I think the first place purse in the first race was about $25,000, which was unheard of back then.
One man in the field knew that tires would be a critical factor, so while everyone else drove their tires off the rim, experienced Indy driver Johnny Mance used a hard compound truck tire on his Plymouth. Mance took the lead on lap 50 and romped to victory 9 laps ahead of second place Fireball Roberts.
With a little Plymouth, and he didn't change no tires. I think he run on average about 65 or 70 mile an hour. And while we was changing tires with lug wrenches, none of this expensive equipment, it took a long time. You get out of your car and eat a hot dog and drink a drink and get back and they have your car ready to go. But he just stayed out there and run. I blowed 22 tires in the first race at Darlington. We was taking tires off of cars out in the infield because we was running plain tires back then, and that track was just grinding them off. But you'd get used to, we finally found out that we cut a hole in the floorboard and you could put a timing light and you could see a white streak coming tire, and you knew you had about 2 laps and you're going to blow a tire. So you got ready and helped the wheel, and we were running on the inside of the track, not where they run today, and you had plenty of time for the car to coast up without hitting the fence.
Mance carried home the $10,000 first prize, but the real winner was Darlington. The Southern 500 immediately became the biggest race of every season.